Tandau Kumalo stepped into the sleek, glass-walled offices of Malanga Tech in Cape Town, her heart racing with excitement. At 21, she was young, driven, and already making waves in the tech world. Over the past few years, she had poured her energy into managing complex projects and developing innovative software that had become the backbone of the company. Today felt like another opportunity to prove herself, especially with the arrival of a new CEO. She smoothed her blazer and took a deep breath as she waited for the official introduction. But when Saifo Dlamini entered, the energy in the room shifted instantly. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His sharp eyes scanned the room, finally landing on Tandai. She offered a warm smile, expecting a friendly handshake or at least a few words of encouragement. Instead, he gave her a cold nod and an almost imperceptible smirk. "Ah, you must be the young prodigy everyone keeps talking about," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let's hope you're as useful as they say." Tandai felt her chest tighten, a mix of shock and irritation bubbling inside her. The office, usually buzzing with collaborative energy, now felt tense and stifling. Colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to intervene. Tandai straightened her posture, refusing to let his attitude rattle her. She knew she was capable, and she wasn't about to let one man's arrogance define her worth. That first interaction set the tone for what would become a stormy chapter in her life, a day that promised challenges, drama, and tests of her determination. But deep down, Tandai felt a spark ignite, a quiet voice whispering that this was just the beginning. Tandai Kumalo thought she had seen it all on her first day with the new CEO. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. The morning had started like any other: emails, project updates, and her usual quick catch-up with her team. Then, Saifo Dlamini strode into the office, his presence instantly commanding attention. Tandai, ever polite, stood to greet him, expecting maybe a formal announcement or a team introduction. Instead, she got something she never imagined. "Effective immediately," Saifo said, his tone sharp and cold. "You're no longer needed here, Tandai. We're cutting costs, and frankly, I prefer hiring cheaper employees who won't demand so much." The words hit Tandai like a punch to the chest. She froze, her mind trying to process what she had just heard. Cheaper employees? After everything she had done, after the countless nights she had stayed late to troubleshoot bugs, after the projects she had saved from near disaster, after creating the very software that kept the company competitive, she was being thrown out as if she meant nothing. Around her, colleagues murmured, their whispers filling the air like nervous static. Some glanced away, uncomfortable, unsure whether to offer support. Others seemed stunned, their eyes wide, as if they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. No one stepped forward. No one challenged the CEO. Tandai realized that in that moment, her reputation, built carefully over years of dedication, felt like it had vanished in an instant. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply turned, her legs moving almost mechanically as she walked past the team who now watched in silence. Her heart raced so fast it felt like it might burst, adrenaline and anger mixing into a tight knot in her stomach. The office that had once been a place of innovation and teamwork now seemed cold and unfamiliar. By the time she reached the street outside Malanga Tech, the sun felt too bright and the city too loud. But amid the shock and humiliation, a small, fierce spark ignited inside her. She refused to let this injustice define her. She refused to let years of hard work be erased by one man's arrogance. Tandai inhaled deeply, the salty sea breeze of Cape Town filling her lungs, grounding her. She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "They think this is the end. They have no idea what I'm capable of." That moment, raw and intense, marked a turning point. What could have crushed her instead lit a fire, a determination that she would fight back, reclaim her worth, and make sure the world knew exactly who Tandai Kumalo was. Her journey wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. Tandai Kumalo sat on the balcony of her small Greenpoint apartment, staring out at the glittering lights of Cape Town. The city was alive with energy, but inside her, a storm raged. She replayed the events of the day over and over in her mind, Saifo's cold words, the whispers of her colleagues, the crushing weight of humiliation. It still felt unreal that after everything she had done, she was dismissed like a replaceable tool. She wrapped her arms around herself and thought about Motsi Tech, the proprietary software she had developed from scratch. That software wasn't just a project, it was her brainchild, the heart of many successful company contracts. She remembered the late nights, the debugging marathon, the endless brainstorming sessions where she had solved problems no one else could. Every line of code, every feature, every improvement had been hers. And yet, in the blink of an eye, it seemed Saifo could take credit for it, or worse, let it vanish under his arrogance. But anger alone wasn't enough. Tandai's mind, sharp and focused, began to shift. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming what was hers legally and professionally. She couldn't let a man's ego erase years of hard work. She needed a plan, one that was smart, careful, and airtight. Her phone buzzed on the table. Lorato Masico, her lawyer friend, was the first person she thought of. Within minutes, they were on a video call. Lorato listened quietly as Tandai recounted everything, nodding thoughtfully, asking precise questions about contracts, project logs, emails, and board meetings. "We can fight this," Lorato said finally, her voice steady. "But we need proof. Every message, every report, every code commit, document it all." Tandai felt a spark of hope ignite. She spent the rest of the night gathering evidence, going through years of project files, emails, and internal presentations. She documented her contributions to Motsi Tech, her role in major client projects, and even moments where she had gone above and beyond to save the company from potential disaster. Her apartment was littered with papers and her laptop hummed with activity, but for the first time since that morning, Tandai felt in control. By the time the clock struck midnight, a plan had begun to take shape in her mind. She would not just reclaim her work. She would make sure her professional worth was recognized, and she would expose the recklessness of a CEO who thought arrogance could replace skill. Tandai leaned back, letting out a long, steady breath. The humiliation of the day still stung, but it had been transformed into fuel, a quiet, determined fire that would drive her forward. Tonight, she realized something important. This was her fight, her story, and no one could take that from her. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but Tandai Kumalo was ready. The next morning, the atmosphere in Malanga Tech's office was tense, buzzing with the quiet hum of computers and the occasional clatter of keyboards. Saifo Dlamini sat behind his sleek mahogany desk, reviewing reports with an air of smug confidence, completely convinced that firing Tandai was a brilliant move. That illusion was about to be shattered. The door burst open, and Nambulan Kyub, Saifo's longtime secretary, stormed in. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor as she crossed the room, her eyes flashing with anger. "Saifo," she demanded, slamming a folder onto his desk. "Do you even realize what you've done? Do you understand the mess you're creating?" Saifo looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Namvula, calm down. I know what I'm doing. We're cutting costs. That's business." Namvula's hands trembled slightly, not with fear but with frustration. "Business? This isn't just about saving a few thousand here or there. Tandai Kumalo isn't just any employee. She's the reason half of our biggest contracts haven't fallen apart. She created Motsi Tech. That software is the backbone of this company. You firing her could ruin everything we've built." Saifo leaned back, smirking. "I've heard enough, Nambula. She'll be fine. Companies replace employees all the time. Besides, she's young. There are plenty of other people who can do her job for less." Nambula's face hardened. "No, you don't understand. You're underestimating her, and you're underestimating the consequences. If she decides to fight this, and trust me, she will, you're risking lawsuits, investors pulling out, and the company's reputation taking a massive hit. Do you want Malanga Tech to collapse because of your arrogance?" Saifo waved her off dismissively. "You worry too much. Just focus on your work, Nambula. I handle strategy." Nambula took a deep breath, trying to contain her fury. She had worked closely with Tandai for years, watched her save the company more times than she could count, and she knew her worth. Yet here was Saifo, blind to it all, treating genius like it was expendable. "I'm telling you this because I don't want to watch a disaster unfold," she said sharply. "Mark my words, this isn't over. Tandai Kumalo is not someone you can push around and forget about." Saifo didn't reply. He returned to his papers, convinced he had already won. But Namvula, furious but composed, left the office with a quiet certainty. Tandai was not just talented, she was unstoppable. And if Saifo thought dismissing her would be the end of the story, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Outside, the office hummed with its usual activity, but under the surface, the first cracks were forming. Tandai's absence was already being felt, and someone, Namvula, was paying attention. She wasn't just a secretary, she was a witness, an ally in the making, and she knew exactly how dangerous underestimating Tandai could be. Saifo, meanwhile, remained oblivious, blind to the storm quietly gathering right under his nose. Tandai Kumalo woke up the next morning with a clear purpose. The humiliation of being fired was still fresh, but she refused to let anger control her. She had spent hours the night before organizing evidence of her work on Motsi Tech, carefully documenting every email, project update, and code commit. Today, she would turn that documentation into action. Her first step was registering her ownership rights over Motsi Tech. Sitting at her laptop, she completed all the legal forms, ensuring that the software she had created, nurtured, and protected would officially be recognized as hers. It wasn't about revenge, it was about claiming what was rightfully hers. Once that was done, she contacted her lawyer, Lorado Masico, and began preparing the formal legal action against Malanga Tech. The case included both wrongful dismissal and intellectual property theft. Tandai's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from a fierce sense of justice. She was finally taking control of a situation that had seemed completely out of her hand. Word of Tandai's actions quickly leaked inside the company. Staff members whispered in the hallways, some shocked, others impressed. Many realized for the first time just how crucial Tandai had been to Malanga Tech's success. Her projects weren't just important, they were essential. The board, who had initially trusted Saifo's decisions, began to question his judgment. Meetings were scheduled, emails were exchanged, and murmurs of doubt about the new CEO's competence began circulating. Through it all, Tandai stayed calm. She didn't storm into the office or shout her grievances. Instead, she let her work speak for itself. Every document she submitted, every legal filing, was precise, professional, and undeniable. She was methodical, controlled, and quietly confident, proving far more with her actions than she ever could with anger or confrontation. Even as tension grew inside Malanga Tech, Tandai felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't reacting to someone else's mistakes. She was creating her own path, taking the steps that would restore her professional reputation and safeguard her intellectual property. By the end of the day, the message was clear. Tandai Kumalo was not someone to be underestimated. Her name, her work, and her rights were officially protected. Malanga Tech's board had started to pay attention, and Saifo's confidence was beginning to crack. The quiet determination that had been burning inside her all along was now visible to everyone. Tandai smiled to herself as she shut her laptop. This was only the beginning. She had taken action, reclaimed her work, and sent a warning without uttering a single shout. The game had changed, and for the first time, Tandai felt completely in control. The story was hers now, and she was ready to see it through. After Tandai Kumalo took legal action, the atmosphere inside Malanga Tech began to shift. It started subtly at first, quiet messages, furtive glances, and discreet emails. Employees who had once watched in silence now began reaching out to her privately. Some sent short notes of encouragement. "You were always the one keeping our projects on track," or "I've seen what you've done for this company. Don't let anyone take that from you." Others offered more tangible support, providing records of meetings, project logs, and emails that highlighted her contributions. For the first time, Tandai felt that the seeds of loyalty and recognition she had planted over the years were blossoming. Saifo's arrogance, which had seemed untouchable, was starting to backfire. Employees who had feared speaking up now whispered among themselves, connecting the dots. They realized that the young woman he had so easily dismissed was, in fact, the glue holding many of Malanga Tech's most critical projects together. Without Tandai, client deadlines were slipping, code updates were delayed, and some contracts were beginning to show cracks. Slowly, the truth became impossible to ignore. Firing her was not a strategic decision, it was a catastrophic mistake. Rumors began spreading outside the company too. Word of Tandai's legal action leaked to industry contacts, and whispers of investors investigating her claims started circulating. Tech forums and local business groups speculated about Malanga Tech's stability, wondering if Saifo had underestimated the value of the very software that kept the company competitive. Each passing day, Tandai's story gained momentum, and with it, her credibility grew. Rather than reacting with anger or confrontation, Tandai remained calm and focused. She posted updates on professional networks, shared her progress in clear and confident language, and continued documenting her work meticulously. Colleagues and outsiders alike began to admire her poise under pressure, recognizing her professionalism, intelligence, and dedication. By the end of the week, the balance of power inside Malanga Tech had quietly started to shift. Employees who once feared speaking up now felt emboldened. Tandai's reputation, which Saifo had tried to erase, was now flourishing in full view. Her quiet determination, combined with years of hard-earned respect, was transforming into a movement of support she hadn't even expected. Tandai leaned back in her chair, reading another message from a former colleague. "We're with you. Don't let him make you invisible." She smiled, feeling a mix of pride and resolve. The tide was turning, and for the first time, she saw a clear path forward, not just to reclaim her work, but to rebuild her professional life stronger and more visible than ever. This was no longer just a fight for justice. It was a demonstration of her power, skill, and the respect she had earned. And everyone was watching. The morning of the court hearing, Tandai Kumalo felt a mixture of nerves and determination. She arrived at the courthouse in Cape Town, dressed sharply, her posture straight, exuding quiet confidence. Today wasn't just another meeting. It was the moment she would face the CEO who had tried to erase her work and prove that her years of dedication and innovation could not be ignored. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Saifo Dlamini sat across from her, visibly uneasy, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. He had been confident before, but the weight of the evidence Tandai and her lawyer, Lorado Masico, had gathered was beginning to press down on him. Lorado stood first, her tone calm but firm as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," Lorado began, "we are here today because Ms. Tandau Kumalo has been wrongfully dismissed from Malanga Tech. Beyond her unlawful termination, the company has attempted to disregard her rightful ownership of the proprietary software Matsi Tech, which she developed entirely on her own." She clicked through a presentation, showing detailed emails, project logs, and meeting notes. Each piece of evidence highlighted Tandau's critical role in the company's project. Screenshots showed Tandau guiding the team through software development, revising key code, and even rescuing major client projects from near disaster. Board meeting minutes clearly documented her presentations and strategic contributions. The courtroom was quiet, every eye fixed on the slides and the documents in front of the judge. Saifo tried to interject, his voice shaky. "But we considered her contributions and hiring costs." Lorado cut him off with a polite but firm shake of her head. "Respectfully, Your Honor, the records speak for themselves. This is not a matter of cost. This is a matter of ownership and unlawful dismissal. The evidence shows that Matsi Tech is Ms. Kumalo's intellectual property, and she cannot be denied her legal rights." Saifo fumbled through his papers, clearly unprepared. The arrogance that had carried him in the office now seemed misplaced in the courtroom. His arguments were weak, fragmented, and easily countered by Lorado's organized presentation. The judge, a sharp and attentive figure, nodded thoughtfully as he reviewed the documentation, clearly impressed by the clarity and depth of Tandau's case. After listening to both sides, the judge spoke. "Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Ms. Kumalo played a primary role in the development of Matsi Tech and that her dismissal raises serious legal concern. I am therefore issuing a temporary injunction protecting her rights over the software and her professional contributions pending further proceedings." A wave of relief and quiet triumph washed over Tandai. She remained composed, letting the moment sink in. Saifo, on the other hand, slumped back in his chair, defeated and shaken, realizing for the first time that he had underestimated her and the law. As Tandai left the courtroom, her head held high, she felt the weight of victory, small but significant, settle on her shoulders. This was the first step toward reclaiming everything she had built, and it sent a clear message. Tandau Kumalo was not just a talented software developer. She was unstoppable when fighting for what was rightfully. Within days of the court hearing, Tandau Kumalo's story began spreading like wildfire. Major tech news outlets picked it up, running headlines that practically shouted her name. CEO fired innovator, company in turmoil, and Matsi Tech creator fights back, wins temporary injunction. Social media lit up with posts from industry insiders, colleagues, and tech enthusiasts. People were sharing screenshots of her projects, praising her professionalism, and marveling at how she had taken control of a situation that could have destroyed her career. The attention didn't stop at the news. Nambulan Kyub, Saifo's secretary, took a bold step and publicly confirmed the story. She shared her first-hand experience of watching Tandai handle major projects, save contracts, and lead teams with unmatched skill. In her posts, Nambula didn't hold back. She exposed Saifo's incompetence and warned clients and investors of the risks of underestimating the woman he had so casually dismissed. Her testimony added credibility to Tandai's claims and amplified the story's reach. Inside Malanga Tech, the reaction was immediate. Employees who had been quietly supporting Tandai now felt emboldened. Teams whispered about her brilliance, sharing memories of how she had solved impossible problems and kept projects afloat. Clients began questioning Saifo's decisions, some even requesting to deal directly with Tandai. Slowly but surely, loyalty started shifting away from the CEO toward the young woman he had tried to push aside. Tandai, however, remained composed. She didn't take to social media to boast or vent. Instead, she let the recognition come naturally through her work and the undeniable truth. Industry leaders began reaching out to congratulate her, offering collaboration opportunities and invitations to speak at tech forums. She realized that the humiliation she had endured was now transforming into validation, not just for her skills, but for her character. The public vindication was more than just professional, it was personal. Every like, share, and message reinforced that she was respected, admired, and unstoppable. She had taken what could have been a career-ending moment and turned it into a story of resilience, intelligence, and quiet power. By the end of the week, Tandai Kumalo had become a symbol in the tech world. the young innovator who refused to be silenced, who fought for her work, and who emerged stronger than ever. Saipho, meanwhile, was facing mounting criticism, with employees and clients increasingly distancing themselves from him. The balance of power had shifted, and Tandai's reputation as a tech leader was now unshakable. For Tandai, this was the moment she had been waiting for, not revenge, not confrontation, but recognition. She had proven that talent, determination, and integrity could outshine arrogance, and the world was finally paying attention. Saipho Dlamini's world began to unravel faster than he could have imagined. Once confident and untouchable, he now faced a storm of problems. Board meetings, which had always been formalities he breezed through, turned into sessions of intense questioning. Investors were furious, demanding explanations for the sudden loss of key personnel and the growing instability of Malanga Tech clients, who had once trusted him, now called directly to voice their concerns, questioning the competence of a CEO who had just fired the very person keeping their projects alive. Saipho tried to maintain a facade of control, but every conversation, every email, chipped away at it. The arrogance that had defined his first days now seemed like a liability. Rumors of legal action and media coverage only added to the pressure, making it impossible for him to ignore the reality. He had made a catastrophic mistake. Then came Nombulan Cube. She didn't storm into the office quietly. Her footsteps echoed authority, her expression sharp and unyielding. She placed a thick folder on Saipho's desk and let out the tension she'd been holding in for weeks. "Saipho, this ends now," she said firmly. "Do you realize what you've done? Look at this." She opened the folder, laying out all the evidence Tandai had collected. Emails, project logs, presentations, and documented proof of her work on Motsi Tech. Nombula's voice didn't tremble. It carried the weight of truth and frustration. "You underestimated her. You thought arrogance could replace talent. You've put the company at risk, the clients at risk, and your authority is on the line. Do you see now?" Saipho's face paled. He fumbled for words, trying to explain, to justify, but Nombula's intensity left him speechless. The staff who had gathered nearby watched as the man who had once commanded respect now shrank under the weight of undeniable truth. His authority crumbled in real time, and whispers of disbelief spread through the office. The tipping point was clear. Saipho's confidence, once so rigid, was replaced by doubt and panic. Nombula's confrontation didn't just expose his recklessness. It showed the staff that leadership could not be bought or faked. Competence, respect, and integrity mattered more than titles or bravado. Outside the office, news of the confrontation leaked, fueling more whispers and speculation. Tandai's vindication was complete, not just in the courtroom or the press, but in the hearts of everyone who had watched her rise calmly, confidently, and professionally while the CEO faltered. For Tandai, it wasn't about enjoying the collapse of another person. It was proof that justice, skill, and determination could overcome arrogance. She had stayed calm, let her work speak, and now the world, and Malanga Tech, could see the truth. Saipho's fall was total, and Tandai's place as a respected and unstoppable tech leader was secure. Tandai Kumalo walked into Malanga Tech one morning, not as the employee who had been fired, but as the rightful leader of her own creations. After months of legal battles, media attention, and quiet determination, she had won back her position and, more importantly, secured full credit for Motsi Tech. Every line of code, every innovation, every success tied to the software was officially recognized as hers. For the first time, she had control, not just over projects, but over the direction of the company itself. Her return wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, it was marked by quiet confidence. Colleagues greeted her with admiration, clients sought her expertise directly, and the board, once skeptical, now looked to her as the true backbone of the company. Tandai used this new authority not just for herself, but to create opportunities for others. She launched a mentorship program specifically for young women in tech, teaching them coding, project management, and the confidence to claim their worth in a world that often underestimated. Her story quickly went viral, shared across social media, tech forums, and business networks. People weren't just celebrating her skills. They were inspired by her resilience, intelligence, and the way she had handled injustice with dignity and strategy. Through it all, Tandai remained humble but firm. She had shown that brilliance combined with perseverance could outshine arrogance and power. She had reclaimed her work, her reputation, and her voice, and in doing so, she had set a new standard for what it meant to be a leader in tech. As she looked out over her team, ready to guide them into a new era of innovation, she smiled quietly to herself. "They thought firing me would end my story," she whispered, eyes glinting with determination. "But it was just the beginning, and now the world is listening."